with all the members present, I think we can start the meeting of the Oregon Ocean Science Trust this Friday, July 10th. Thank you all for joining us. I think we typically just do some brief introductions. I will start with myself, and then we'll do the members, and then we also have several staff members, and the members of the public are free to just announce themselves as well. So I'm Laura. I am the director of the Oregon Ocean Science Trust, Laura Anderson.
Jim Sumich, trust member.
Christina Volniakovsky, trust member.
Shelby Walker, trust member.
Steve Marks, trust member.
Representative David Gomberg, trust member, non-voting.
Senator Arnie Roblin, trust member, non-voting, legislative.
And for our staff support, we have, first of all, Andrea is now the coordination support for OOST. Formerly Eric Metz was in that role. She's the policy and legislative analyst with DSL. And
hi, everyone.
And Lonnie is our, she helps with our scheduling and meeting prep and got the announcements out for us, and that was great. Thank you, Lonnie.
Sure. Good morning.
And Caitlin is also with DSL. She's the rules coordinator, and she really helped us get through the rulemaking process, and we'll go through that agenda item with Caitlin today.
Morning, everyone.
And Edward is the dark box there. He's the IT support person. So if something goes wrong on this call, it's all his fault, and I'm fine with that.
Good morning.
Just kidding, Edward. Thank you for getting us set up here. And we are being recorded, and this will be posted to YouTube after the meeting. So Edward said to remind you all to be on your best behavior, but I don't think that's necessary. And then from our public, looks like we have a couple folks.
Hi, I'm Charlie Plymon, Oregon Policy Manager for Surfrider Foundation, member of the public.
Maybe one folk. Okay. Well, I gotta say, we are all seasoned Zoom meeting attendees when you can do a roll call like that with 12 people and nobody jumps over the top of each other, and I don't have to tell anybody they're on mute. That's fantastic. We have a pretty important agenda today in sequence that will hopefully get us to an endpoint of something that we can move forward with. We will need to, well, first of all, we'll approve our January meeting, hopefully. And then we have to approve the rule changes, and that will allow us, if we do that, to approve an agreement with Oregon Community Foundation. And if we get to that step, that would allow us to proceed to grant writing for an Oregon Marine Reserve assessment process. So it's a nice process. Hopefully we can move through each of these items without much ado, because I think we're familiar with a lot of it. So do the members have the January 24th meeting summary notes available to them?
Yes.
Yes.
Are there any amendments to the meeting notes as presented?
Move approval.
Second.
We had an approval from somebody.
Jim.
Jim, thank you. And sounded like Christina seconded.
Yeah.
All in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, so approved. Okay, Lonnie's gonna show in the screen view the documents that we need to review as we come upon them. And first off, if I have to pause and be a little slow, it's just managing multiple documents on my screen is a little bit of a challenge, and sometimes it takes me a moment to flip between my screens and get there. So we'll get that up, and I don't. Is this the document up now, Lonnie? Proposed rule changes.
Yeah, this is the first agenda item with the rule changes.
Okay, can you take us to, is this the track changes copy so we can see where changes have been made? There we go.
Okay.
All right. So if I'm not mistaken, we went through quite a bit of this in our March meeting. Oh, we've gone through this before. This has now been through Rules Committee, and so we'll just go through them change by change. The first at the top is that we're just striking competitive grants program from the title because these rules are broader and more general than just competitive grants now. And the purpose now reflects also that these are rules more general to the Science Trust than just a competitive grants program. And I should just briefly review, although I know we all know this, I'm usually not very good about providing background. I make assumptions, but all of this, all these changes are just to allow our rules to be consistent with the legislative change to allow us to receive third-party funding for and private funding for OOST projects. In the policies, we amended the policies to be to mirror the bylaws. It shouldn't be too controversial. None of the rules members had an issue with that. It just allows our bylaws and our policies to be the same, which is good. Also mirrors the legislation. And we did make a change to the original rules, often referred to the Ocean Science Trust, and we have kind of chosen to go by the Oregon Ocean Science Trust. So you'll see a lot of little changes just to the nomenclature to replace OST with OOST. And this was always, whenever you talk about peer review and review, it's always a very controversial topic. The Rules Committee chewed on this quite a bit. Down in the actual rules section, we refer to peer review, and this is the definition section above. And the definition that was adopted or that was accepted by the Rules Committee is that peer review is a scrutiny of work or ideas by colleagues, peers who are qualified to provide scientific merit-based review. Shelby, as a member of the Rules Committee, was really useful in helping navigate through this with her scientific prowess, so I appreciate that. I might pause here to see if any of the members have any comments on this particular item, because it was an item that was took some work for the Rules Committee to get through that. All right, well, hearing none, then we can proceed. So the competitive grants process was already in the rules. We did add that the OOST may use a portion of funds available to support the administrative costs of the OOST or a third-party administrator selected by the OOST. We thought it was important just to clarify in the rules that OOST has the authority to use funds for administrative costs. And here on subsection C, this is where we refer to the peer review as opposed to the technical review of competitive grant proposals. We do that several times. We're replacing technical review with peer review. We have the caveat here that OOST is the final decision authority in the selection of proposals to be funded unless such authority is inconsistent with the terms of any agreement that is reached. And if you recall, that is important because particularly one of the third parties that we would like to work with, the Oregon Community Foundation, does hold ultimate veto power. It's not based on necessarily technical merits of proposal, but it's their need to be a responsible fiscal agent. And so they need to ensure that they do diligence on any potential grantees, and they do want final decision authority in the event that they're administering any funds for the OOST if they find anything inconsistent with their standards. All right, very good. Okay, any questions on the few little updates that we made to the competitive grants portion of the rules, or any comments? Okay. In that case, we can move on to the newer, most of this is, actually I think all of this is new copy, new rules. This next section allows the OOST to make direct non-competitive grants to public entities. We currently have that stated as including but not limited to state agencies, county agencies, local agencies, or public universities. And it also, in this section, allows us to retain administrative funds and also allows the DSL to be reimbursed for administrative costs. We did have a comment on this section from an individual from one of the Indian tribes who wanted to ask that the Indian tribes be, federally recognized Indian tribes be eligible for these direct non-competitive grants. That was not contemplated by the Rules Advisory Committee. That comment came in after we had adjourned. I wanted to have a discussion amongst the board of what the will of the OOST is in terms of including explicitly federally recognized Indian tribes as eligibility for direct non-competitive grants. They are eligible for competitive grants, kind of de facto in the rules above, but for the direct non-competitive, these were intended to be what you might consider pass-through kinds of situations where the OOST can act as a conduit to allow public entities to receive funds from private dollars. So that said, I guess I would open it up for some discussion on this potential request.
Well, I think this is Christina, and what I think is that we should, they are a sovereign government, and if we're treating other government agencies and public universities as such, then I think it's absolutely appropriate to recognize tribal governments as sovereign governments as well. And I support including them.
Senator Roebland, I would agree with that comment.
This is Shelby. As would I just want to ask if the current proposed language a public body as defined in ORS 174.019 is inclusive of the groups that are currently outlined in the text?
Yes, that is an excellent question, and that is why I posed that question to Matt DeVore in advance of this, because I suspected we might want some legal consult. He did give some good consult on this and has proposed a wording change in the event that we want to proceed with that. Caitlin or Lonnie, do you have that? Or Andrea, do you have that available for the group's consideration?
Yeah, I have some excerpts pulled from his email. But yeah, he specifically included that statute as reference to include all of the different things that were already identified, and then specifically state universities, and then explicitly state tribes, because his opinion didn't feel like right now that they were included. How do I share my screen? Oh, here we go. Can I do this?
Director Anderson, this is, sorry.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Steve.
Thank you, Director Anderson. So if I likewise am supportive of including tribal governments explicitly here in the language. But I'm just trying to get a clarity on the comments that were just made. Am I to understand then that according to the statutory definition of public entities, currently tribal governments are included, and so that they would be technically, currently they're part of this not limited to part of the public entity, but the question on the floor now is whether or not to explicitly list them in the language.
Yeah, let me address that. So Matt's response was that the current language as proposed likely excludes tribes.
Thank you.
So we would want to make a change to explicitly include.
Yes, they're currently not found in a common definition of public body because they are a separate entity in a sovereign nation. So we would have to explicitly say that they were included. Lonnie, Zoom isn't letting me share my screen, but I just emailed you the document that I wanted to share. It says that 2 people can't share the screen. So if you could just pull it up, I just sent it to you.
Did he also indicate that universities were not included in that definition as well?
Universities are, and as I think you'll see in the language, universities are included in the definition of public entity or public body as defined in a previous statute that he's recommending that we reference and we adopt the previous statute. And it does actually define the university as a certain list of universities that are defined in statute as well as being public universities.
Okay.
I apologize. I can stop share, Andrea, and then you can grab it.
Did it not come through?
It was taking a really long time to load for some reason, so.
Oh, okay.
If you have it up, then.
So his opinion is that currently federally recognized tribes would not be included. He went through a conversation about the intent of the statute and that the current rules are narrower than the statute. The statute's very broad in what it includes, and because of the way that the current rules are defining who is eligible, and it's specifically stating public entities, he went through in the longer version of his email the difference between public bodies and public entities, and there are a number of different ways to define them, but through, I guess, the legal interpretation of commonly used definitions of public entities and public bodies, tribes were not found anywhere within them. So by saying that public entities and universities or counties, local governments, like the original draft that we had, it does not include tribes. So he suggested in his language that we broaden and I guess make it a little bit more concise by referencing the specific definition that we're referencing, since the current rules do not have an actual definition of public body. So we're referencing another statute that has a defined definition of public body, and then we're referencing public universities that are defined in another statute. And then we are also explicitly saying federally recognized tribes. So that was DOJ's proposed fix if we did want to include tribes in the non-competitive grants.
It also appears that from their recommendation, we should do this part of this change anyway to get public universities in, because they were not in the one, but they were in the other one. So I think, from my perspective, this looks good.
Well, I think oh, Shelby, did you have a comment?
Well, I was just kind of getting back to my original question, which is, so if we adopt the current, the proposed language that's in the comment, which is reflected here on the screen, public body as defined in ORS 174.019, that reflects the state agencies, county agencies, local agencies.
Correct, yes, because those are in commonly used definitions. Yes, so it kind of truncates and just says that it is this definition, which includes counties and local governments and all of the other things that we originally wanted to be able to award non-competitive grants to.
Yes, and I did look up that ORS 174.019, and I'm trying to find it now, but I think it would be good if we included that in the definitions so that we just define public body in the definitions up front, the same as it is in the statute. That way where the reader has that information available to them.
I just looked up the definition of 174.019, and I believe it's actually a typo, and it needs to be 174.109. So we should change that. Yeah.
Good catch, Caitlin.
Gee, how's that?
Okay, so you said 174.
109.
109. Okay.
Okay. Any other discussion on this proposed change? I will send a letter to Mr. Trolley, I believe the name was, and let him know directly that we have amended our rules to reflect his comment. All right, shall we flip back to the document, please?
Yes, let me stop sharing. Come on. Maybe.
I think I kicked you off.
Thank you, Lonnie. I was like,
Yeah.
I don't even see the option on my bar anymore. So, okay, thank you.
All right. The next two items, 2 and 3, relate to the authority for reimbursement of administrative costs, as mentioned. All right, the heart of the rule change is here with the agreement with the private nonprofit. This allows the executive director, under the direction of the board, to enter into the agreement that would allow the third party to distribute funds. We scratched the "to any person who submits a proposal," thinking that was kind of unclear and seemingly broad, but that we would distribute funds received for activities that are consistent with our priorities, policies, and procedures. you can kind of read that yourself. I know I don't need to read it all to you. I'm just trying to point out some of the highlights and areas where we might have had more significant discussion. I think that's fairly straightforward all on that page. Whoa, is that it? Boom. Okay. I don't know how much, Caitlin, do we need to review these notices? I was kind of more concerned about the substance of the rules themselves.
They're attached as appendix items in case anyone was curious to see the notice or the rule draft.
Okay.
The temporary rule filing is also included as well. The temporary rules expire at the end of August, and we're going to have the permanent rules filed before the temporary rules expire.
Okay.
So do we need a motion to put in the changes with regard to tribes into the rules before we take any action on the rules?
Thank you, Senator Roblin. I think we should take action to make the amendment regarding the tribes and then take a subsequent action to approve the rules in their full suite of changes. So I'd entertain a motion for the first.
So a quick question before we
Yes.
make a motion. Is it adopting the language as indicated in the comment that incorporates the tribes, but also the more explicit language with reference to the statutes?
I believe my understanding was that we would adopt the language as proposed by council that was previously on the screen, and that we would reference, in addition to referencing the correct statute in the particular rule, we would also add definition of public body to the definition section that matches that reference.
Great, thank you.
So
I make a motion.
the wording that we'll be adopting is what was shown on the email. Is that correct? The DOJ wording?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I second the motion.
So we have a first from Shelby, a second from Christina. Any further comment? And so all in favor, say aye.
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 No.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. Thank you so much, Caitlin and Andrea in particular, for all of your help on that. We had a really good rules committee that worked through some sticky stuff that I think made things a lot smoother for us as a board to be able to move forward with confidence. So I'll make sure that we thank those folks appropriately. Okay. The next agenda item is the agreement with the Oregon Community Foundation.
Laura?
Yes? Yes,
Okay.
Shelby?
Sorry, the motion was to adopt that specific language. Do we need a second motion to
Oh,
adopt?
yes,
that?
forgive me, please. Yeah, I'm sorry, I missed that. We were gonna do a two-step process. Do I hear a motion to adopt the rule changes in full as presented?
I make a motion.
Thank you.
Second.
Second by Steve, was it?
Jim.
Jim, okay, thank you, Jim. And any comment on that before we vote? All right, all in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, hearing none, that motion passes, and all the stuff I said before is now appropriate. Okay. All right, the agreement with the Oregon Community Foundation, which, wow, the wheels turn slowly. Looking back at when Luis started this conversation a little over 2 years ago with Oregon Community Foundation. We're finally in a position where we have the option to legally sign this document, which would allow us to go into agreement with them. I had been in touch with OCF as recently as yesterday, and they're ready to go with us. Christina was really helpful in bringing this together. Her and I both met with OCF. This is pretty standard boilerplate stuff for them. We have been through this agreement before. It's a pretty short agreement. I don't know how much detail we need to go back into this agreement at this point. Does anybody have any specific questions regarding how an agreement with OCF would generally work? I would, was there a question, comment? Okay. So, I mean, essentially this is a donor advised fund where we would set up a fund, you know, with OCF. The basic mechanics is that a funder would give money to OCF to place in the Ocean Science Trust account, and we would work with OCF to distribute those funds either to nonprofits, or in the event that it's an individual, maybe back to OOST and then out to individuals. So there's some different pathways that could be involved here. It's a very reasonable administrative fee. There are some requirements for maintaining minimums in the account of $25,000. So there are some things that we have to be aware of, but I feel like we would not go into something that was not worthy of going through all of this hassle. So did anybody have any questions after reading through the agreement that we should bring up or address here? Well, hearing none, I would entertain a motion to allow me as the director to sign this agreement on behalf of the OOST and initiate our relationship.
Laura, I did have one question.
Yes.
So in looking at paragraph 5, says suggested recipients shall be tax exempt charitable organizations described in IRS code 501c3 or governmental units described in section 17c1. Just to be clear, that is consistent with our language as just adopted?
Well, I would respond to that by saying I think the OCF agreement is more limiting than the language we just adopted. OCF has, you know, some limits. They don't make payments to individuals, like to a contractor or some such thing, or to a private entity, whereas we could do that as OOST. Does that clarify? So in the event that we had to pay a contractor to administer a grant as, say, a consultant or something, we would have to have the OCF release funds back to OOST, and then we could make payments. And my understanding is that's not an uncommon situation for OCF to use those pathways.
I also had a question about the governmental units described in section 170C1. I'm not familiar with that. And so I was just wondering if the federal recognized tribes are part of that. Do you know if there are any restrictions? Because I don't think I asked them when we were talking to them about being able to provide funding to federally recognized tribes.
Yes, that's a good question. I don't think that we contemplated that or clarified that with OCF. We do as with, if it is a limitation on their part, we do have the pathway that I just described, which is to pass money back to OOST so that those payments could be made to tribes. I'd be very surprised if they had a limitation as such, but I think it's something that we might be able to do some quick research on. I don't know if if staff has the opportunity to maybe look into that in the background while we're contemplating this.
Yes, give me just a few minutes. I'm going to figure it out.
Okay. Thank you, Andrea. So while we're looking that up, are there other areas that would require some discussion or further investigation on the OCF agreement? Okay. We could also, Andrea, we could table this for the time being and move to the next agenda item and come back to it if it will require a little more time.
So based on the definition that I'm finding on the IRS's website and some other guiding documents, I don't believe that it would include tribes because they are a sovereign nation and it has to do with taxable eligibility.
Aye, got you. Governmental units described in 170C1. No. I would say based on my conversations with OCF, they're not very, there are really good reasons why they have the fund agreements that they have. I don't know that this is something that would be negotiable or not. I don't know if we have one of two routes here. We could either table the signing of this agreement until I can resolve that with them, or we could move forward with the knowledge that we have an alternate pathway in the event that we are going to be sending funds to tribes.
Laura, quick question. So there is no limitation if the funds are transferred to the OOST and the fund for us to give it to the tribes?
I don't know specifically about tribes, but my understanding was that in the case of contractors and individuals that are not 501c3 or government entities, that there was no limitation in that.
Well, if that's the case, then I would say we should move forward with the agreement, and I would make a motion to accept it.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Jim seconds. Are there any further comment or question? All right, hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, passes unanimously. That's a good question, and I will investigate the answer to that for our information so we know what to expect moving forward. All right. How we all doing? Pretty good? Anybody need a break? Feeling all right?
I'm good.
All right, good. Tough group. Okay, so the next agenda item is wherein I'd like to request this board to give conditional approval for us to proceed in grant writing and submitting grants for the Oregon Marine Reserves assessment. I've asked Shelby to queue this up for us as she has a lot of different touch points on this particular project and probably the best working knowledge of how where things are at and how this can work as anyone that I've talked to. So Shelby, can you walk us through a little bit here?
Sure, Laura, thank you. Happy to do so. So one of the other hats that I wear is as chair of OPAC Science and Technical Advisory Committee. And that group was charged with the managing the assessment of Oregon's marine reserves. The final report for that assessment is due to the state legislature in 2023. STAC has been working diligently to establish criteria and a process to enable that assessment and established a timeline that allows for a public university to conduct the assessment, public university in Oregon, to conduct the assessment in sufficient time and process to be robust and to deliver a document that effectively outlines the assessment of both the process of the marine reserves and the impact of the marine reserves. Unfortunately, one of the things that was not included in the original mandate from the state was support for the assessment in terms of funding. And so we have been working with OPAC and with the support of our state legislators, specifically, thank you, Senator Roblin, for your support on this, working to try to secure funding for the assessment through the state process. That was unsuccessful. And the most recent effort was through this short session this past, what feels like a really, really long time ago in February. So as of right now, there is no funding for the assessment. And so in order to ensure that this is a robust and objective assessment, funding does need to be secured to move this forward. So there have been conversations within OPAC on approaches that could be sought to enable this assessment to move forward. And I greatly appreciate all the work that's been done to really move this possibility forward. And there have been conversations with some sponsors. I know Packard is one, and there are others, to use the Oregon Ocean Science Trust process, really the process for which it was established, to allow the OOST to then support the assessment process. So this does require that we put in proposals for that type of support. As of right now, and in discussions with the STAC, the original estimate for the assessment was in the 250K range, 250,000 range. That did include indirect costs for the university. There may be requirements on the part of sponsors to ensure that the indirect costs are not the typical university indirect costs, which would have significant impact on the total dollar figure. And so right now, and in consultation with the STAC members, we believe that the process as currently outlined in the STAC materials, the RFP, all of which is publicly available, could be done for approximately, $150,000 to $160,000. In order to meet the deadline as outlined in the mandate from the state, we do need to move forward with seeking funding. And for us to use the OOST process as outlined and as currently enabled from our previous conversation, proposals do need to go into potential sponsors within the next few months. With that, I will leave it. Laura, is there anything else that you would like me to add or cover?
No, Shelby, thank you. I just think it's also, I just want to recognize that there was kind of a small group of us, including some Karin Braby from ODF&W and Andy Lanier and Charlie Plymon from Surfrider, who came together to kind of brainstorm on this. And we looked at some other options, being like just ask for a delay, ask for an extension. Like, we can't do this in this time period. We considered a very low cost option where an ODF&W does more of an internal review. But I think we rejected those options and said we should try to do the job that was expected and outlined. And so that's what brings us here today. Our conversations with at least the primary, what we consider to be kind of the primary anchor funder, is really positive at this point. And that entity is able to bring some others with, but there are some things to be really cautious of. The perception of outside influence is something that has to be strongly considered in how we will recruit dollars for this. So there's still a need for us to build partnerships with in-state organizations, both private and, to the extent possible, public. ODF&W may not have the cash to support this assessment, but they will be doing a lot of work. There's a lot of built-in capacity there and in kind that is part of this. So what we see in terms of timeline is the need to get proposals in probably soon. Soon meaning like in the next couple of weeks, so that we can get in early July. A lot of these funders look to August to, making decisions on what's going to happen. So really, we're kind of asking for pre-approval to proceed with fundraising in that vein, recognizing that we just need approval now to get proposals out there, but this is still a long game. We're going to be another, probably until, Shelby, when would you say? Maybe until spring of next year of actively fundraising.
So for us to meet the timeline as indicated in the STAC process, the fiscal agent needs to be, the funding and the fiscal agent needs to be identified in the spring, early spring, because that will inform the process as issued in a public RFP.
So the imminent request is just to allow us to go ask, and then our intent is to come back. It would be another series of meetings of this board to actually approve moving forward at major steps of accepting funding and so forth. We just kind of want a permission to proceed. Does that sound accurate, Shelby? Okay.
Yep.
So I assume there might be some questions. Steve, you have, and Christina, both a lot of experience in foundations and so forth. Are there any questions that you have or any concerns or comments?
Thank you, Director Anderson. And I thank you, Dr. Walker, for the information. I did have one question about the process of the assessment writ large, and that is to say, are the metrics and the performance evaluation criteria that are going to be and methodologies that are going to be used to evaluate the Marine Reserve Program, are those established by the STAC? And or to what extent are in the grant seeking process that process may impact, what kind of criteria are being used, what sort of methodologies, what sort of technologies are being used to evaluate the program? Are those up for discussion in the grant writing process, or are those firmly established by the STAC alone? Does that make sense?
So yeah, that's a really good question. And I will say that STAC has been working for the past few years on establishing those criteria, which are actually derived from OPAC. So those will be articulated in the RFP, and they are not areas for negotiation.
I just want to say this, Senator Rubin. I just want to say that I was very frustrated we couldn't get the money for ODF and W. I appreciated Shelby and all the others that got us the information we needed to put it into a bill. I have had conversations with other senators in particular about what were the wars of the time when we were trying to get the Marine Reserve set up, and everybody believes we have to have an independent analysis, and that's why the universities were picked as a possibility. And so I'm still frustrated that the state hasn't stepped forward to pay for this. It should have done that from the beginning. It's only going to get worse, though, with the current recession that we're in. So having a process like this to get some resources outside is exactly what OST was set up to do. And because I anticipate seeing different groups giving money to this project, it is the function of our group to make sure that the process is held consistent, and with STAC and all those others, making sure the criteria are there should inoculate where the money comes from, because the outcomes should be determined by the questions that are being asked by STAC and the information that's been gathered over the last 10 years from ODF and W. So my hope is that we actually meet the needs of this process, and that the reason for setting up OOST in the first place gets realized through this process. So I'm really excited that we're involved in it, and I hope I'm on a couple other foundations. I will talk to you guys later about Spirit Mountain and some of the other tribal foundations that are out there that do have resources, and they may be willing to put a few dollars into this because I think they see the oceans as really important culturally and otherwise. And so I think there are ways we can get some local money coming in from foundations here in our state. So I look forward to the process and look forward to helping in any way I can. So. And I'm having a foundation meeting with the Spirit Mountain next Friday, so I will actually bring it up. So we needed to have, for this round, we needed to have the money, the request already in, but the next round is coming up soon, so we will keep you informed.
And Senator, if there's any information that you need to help inform these conversations, please don't hesitate to let me know.
Okay, thank you, Shelby.
Yes, thank you, Senator. And for all the board members, kind of the rough math, Shelby suggested that we're in about $150,000 total cost. We probably still have at least a $50,000 gap in that. So if that gives you a sense of what the lift is to get us to completion, if that's helpful. I personally am going to be going to the commodity commissions. You don't have to tell me that marine reserves funding is a tough sell for the fishing community, but I have an argument for them, and I won't bore you with it, but I'm going to place my argument with the commodity commissions and see if there might be $5,000-6,000 available from that. So any kind of small contributions, you know, in the few thousands of dollars is going to be very welcome. And the anchor funders will be really wanting to see that too. So that will be something that we'll be moving forward with as a group as we get this out there and start getting commitments in. I think another thing that will require discussion moving forward, and I don't know if we're prepared for it today, Shelby and I, you know, kind of chatted about this briefly, is, you know, what is really UST's role in supporting this assessment process? And I think right now being a conduit and being, even though we're inexperienced perhaps as an organization, there's a lot of trust in this group because of what each of us as individuals brings to this organization. So UST is playing an important role as being kind of a trusted conduit for doing this kind of a public-private partnership. How much administration will UST take on and what those roles will be, I think is something that we still will need to discuss moving forward, but I'm glad that we have the rules in place to allow UST to be able to have some administrative fees to support paid people to do that work if it's above and beyond what this board can take on voluntarily. So I think we'll have more discussions about that probably in our subsequent meetings. Safe to say, Shelby?
Yes, absolutely.
Thanks. All right. I don't have anything further to report on that agenda item. Are there any other questions or comments before we proceed to possible motion?
No, just want to thank you for all your efforts on this, because I think this will be very exciting as it develops.
I know, we're going to do something. All right. Well, I would entertain a motion, and the motion at this point is to approve submitting grant proposals for the Marine Reserves Assessment Project.
So moved.
Second.
All right, Christina first and Jim second. Any further comment, question? And so all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, very good. Well, that's the heavy stuff. We did it. What a great group to work with. Most of the next agenda items are just kind of the sweep up. And then we do have time for public comment at the end of the meeting. So are there any member updates or any other business for the meeting today? No news is good news in my world these days, so I'm quite fine with that. So next steps and assignment of tasks. Just to clarify that staff will be submitting the rules changes, and I will sign the OCF document and get clarification and get back to you on the OCF tribal conduit mechanism. And Shelby will be taking lead on the grant writing for the Marine Reserves assessment, and her and I work kind of together with the funders at this point. And if you as individuals can start those conversations with any of your contacts for small or large contributions to this project, that is now is a good time to do so. That's pretty much all the next steps and assignments as I see it. Did I miss anything?
Do you have, for the purposes of any of us who have some contacts with foundations, and especially Senator Roblin going to Spirit Mountain, is there like a 2-page summary that could be provided in case we have the opportunity to meet with some foundations on our own?
I can put that together. I have multiple versions and I just can update it to reflect the current
really helpful.
situation.
Thank you.
Great.
Yeah, that would be helpful, Shelby, if you could get me a copy within the week or so. That'd be great. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Great. So just a reminder, Shelby, if you send that to Lonnie, then she'll send it out to everyone so we don't have any public meeting issues, or send it individually. I'm just going to jump up to public comment before we discuss our next meeting time. If there is anything, Charlie, I think you're our public today. Can you enlighten us with anything today?
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
For the record, my name is Charlie Plymon, Oregon Policy Manager, Surfrider Foundation. I live in South Beach, Oregon. Thanks to everyone and for all your work and to the progress of both the RAC and OOST today. I'm heartened by the motion to include tribes in your competitive grant making. I think, or whatever we're calling the funding now. I think that's particularly important, Senator Roblin, if you are extending the invitation to Spirit Mountain in the fundraising efforts. We want to make sure we have those I's dotted and T's crossed for all that inclusion. So that's really great to hear. Just as a side note, I've done projects that were funded by Oregon Community Foundation where I have directly funded support in partnerships with tribes. So I don't, that language wasn't a complication for Surfrider Foundation. It was kind of low hanging programmatic work, but I think that it shouldn't be a hiccup for the trust in your work as well, in that discussion that you had. I think it's a little bit of I'm a little bit heartened and also hurt a little that the motion to approve grant making for private foundations to support the evaluation of the marine reserves. I would have really liked to have seen the state of Oregon step up on that. I know Roblin was frustrated, and I was heartened to hear kind of his response and comments on that. I was equally frustrated as well. Really thinking back to 12 years ago when the discussions were happening. And at the end of the day, when the legislation happened, both pieces of legislation, I think about who asked for the evaluation, and it wasn't just the legislature. It was the user groups. So I don't think you need to be afraid to go and ask commodity commissions. I don't think you need to be worried about talking to recreational users. They demanded an evaluation of the program. In fact, they demanded an evaluation of whether or not and how bad it was going to hurt communities. And to be frank, the environmental community demanded an evaluation of how big these marine reserves were and whether or not they were going to be big enough to protect our nearshore resources. And the agency said, you know what, in 10 years, we're not going to know either one of those things very well. But in 10 years, we can find out whether or not we can afford to run this program and we can do the science and the stuff that we were mandated to do. And, we whittled that down to $150,000. And I think we can do this. But just think about where we're asking for money from. When you ask for money for ocean and marine reserve work in Oregon, if you're taking it for the state, for the evaluation, you're taking it from another group that would have gotten that money. And I don't say this out of self-preservation. I say this I know that the pocket of money for foundations to give to Oregon is limited. And I know that the resources of those is dwindling, just like the state of Oregon's resources are. So we need to be thoughtful in how we approach that, both as a science trust and in our collaborative efforts in fundraising, so that we're not stepping all over each other and we're doing the best job that we can, particularly when we think about what the evaluation does. So this is my last little note. If you're funding science that's going to go through a university that may go into another hands and then take off a considerable amount of overhead, as a private foundation, it's a lot more attractive to fund that directly to the scientists that would do it. And so I don't know, you know, in the long run, whether that's going to be a challenge for the system that we've set up. And the only way I know that that won't be a challenge is if the state is ponying up money equally with private foundations too. So I'll stop there. I've kind of gone over my time at this point. But thank you guys for your work. I really commend the work of the trust, and I look forward to hopefully supporting your work in fundraising into the future.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Charlie. Just so appreciate the support of Surfrider for OOST and for your personal contribution to championing ocean science in the legislature and the communities. I'm just very glad that you continue to come and participate with us, and we'll be working closely together moving forward with you as well. So okay, this is the point where we say roundabout, when do we think we should meet next, and are there any topics for the next meeting? My sense on this is that the soonest we might have something concrete to bring back to this organization would likely be early fall, as we go about our fundraising efforts. We could just suggest that we'll do a doodle poll and try to get something on the table for early fall. And by early fall, I guess I mean like the beginning of October, which is actually when proposals would be kind of in the hopper and getting feedback.
I do have a question. Since Oregon budgets are due at the end of July, are we requesting any additional funding for the next biennium through DSL? Has there been much discussion on that, or because of all the budget cuts that the state of Oregon is facing, we may not go there?
I have to pass that over to Representative Gomberg and or Senator Roblin for a response. I do not know.
Yeah, we are in a cuts budget mode right now, so it's kind of difficult. I would hope that DSL would put a line item in their budget request. Hopefully, I don't know if they did it in the past or not, but I would hope that they would, since that we continue to work with them, and I think it is the right place for us to be housed. So I would hope that they would do some. I would certainly fight for whatever we can do there. As we get closer, we have to introduce our bills by the end of September. So as you think about it, I would be more than happy to put another request in to put money into Fish and Wildlife's budget for this. I felt they should have fought harder for it personally, because this is one of their, they were asked to do this a long time ago. The fact that we let it slide, that they didn't get the money for the evaluation, I think Charlie was absolutely correct in saying that it was all the groups that pushed for assessment at the end of that big kind of fight we had 10 years ago. So they should all be fighting to make sure that the assessment is done. I am a bit frustrated by that, but so anything that I can do between now and the time I retire, I'd be glad to. But you do have I assume, a returning legislator in Representative Gomberg, so he can maybe take that mantle on as well. So, thanks.
Well, and when Senator Roblin does retire, he'll of course leave really large shoes behind for somebody to fill, but somebody will be filling them. So we'll have another senator on board here as well. We started this meeting describing 2020 as a year of uncertainties, and that is certainly the case with the state budget right now. We are in the process of reviewing that budget. We're waiting to find out whether the federal government's going to give us any help in filling the many holes. I would agree with the senator that it makes sense to move forward. I would say very candidly, and don't put this in the minutes, that I would not be particularly optimistic. But I think there's nothing wrong with asking, even though we understand that the situation is uncertain, and we're probably looking more at a cuts budget than we are at any increases.
Well, it might make sense to at least reach out to Director Walker from DSL to see if there is an opportunity to do a policy option package for this in terms of the DSL budget. I doubt that there will be an opportunity to do that just because of the budget cuts scenario. But I don't know what other mechanism would be available to try to get some funding. Is it possible to do it just through legislation without it going through an agency?
That's how we've got most of it lately, has been not through the agencies, because the agencies have their own agenda for their own stuff, and we are side to that. So many agencies have groups like UST that are connected with them, and most of the time those people are asked to go fight the battles for themselves in the legislature. So yes, it's finding champions in the legislature to make it work. I will tell you that even universities, I have spent a lot of time in my career working on getting the money that we need for foresters, all sorts of the programs that Oregon State and Shelby and all those people know about and run. The universities put it in, it always gets cut before we get started, and we have to come up with our own bills to fund all sorts of those kinds of programs that I think make the big difference at the end of the day. And I've enjoyed championing those, but I would be much happier if they were embedded in budgets, but they haven't been. So yes, I think there are legislative ways to do that.
And I was just noting Charlie's comment here in the chat box about a budget call with the Oregon Conservation Network. Is that something we should ask Charlie more about?
Charlie, can you elaborate on that comment?
I'm sorry, I did not hear that.
Your comment regarding the budget call with Oregon Conservation Network?
Oh yes, I'm just having they have a new staffer that will be working this year. They rely heavily on the League of the Oregon League of Women Voters to work with some of their budget work. But the short of that is I'll just be looking at opportunities for that community to advocate during the legislative session, and also looking for opportunities within agency budgets. And so there's a few individuals in that group that are pretty strong. Senator Roblin has worked a lot with some of these individuals in the building, and as well as Representative Gomberg. And so they kind of understand both their influence, but also sort of the opportunity and networking with them a little bit. The other thing I see is just kind of bringing them into the fold, because they've been a little bit out of the loop on fully understanding the evaluation need of the program, and maybe a role that they could potentially play beyond just the budget and what's happening in the legislature. So that's kind of what my call is about this afternoon. One is to kind of look at what's coming up in the 2021 legislative session opportunities, but also to kind of catch them up in general on what the evaluation is about, where the program is at, and why this is important, and if there's a role that they can play.
And the League of Women Voters has been really supportive of these programs. They were supportive of the ask. They have been clearly on top of this kind of stuff, and including the whole conversation that we had up and down the coast on marine reserves. So good thoughts, Charlie. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I just feel like when it comes down to that Ways and Means process and things get really fast and traded quickly, and it's about being able to see that. And it's a very big, complicated process to follow it and track it all for natural resources. So they've been really great partners, as well as the Oregon Conservation Network, in those opportunities.
Yeah.
Just to speak really quickly to the DSL budget process. So I think that it's probably too late in the process to include something for the next biennium. Our proposed budget and all of our policy option packages and legislative concepts have already gone to the land board for approval. So that is another check mark in our DSL budget formation timeline. That's not to say that we couldn't get together and talk about something for like the following biennium, but for right now, all of our stuff is set. We do have one policy option package that is for capacity. So my current role and my ability to support the OOST and also pay attention and be the one point of contact for all ocean policy for the Oregon Department of State Lands. I'm currently in a limited duration role that the agency has filled because of the need, and my position and a handful of other positions are going to be in a policy option package. So like we definitely have some capacity constraints that we've filled with limited duration roles that will be expiring at the end of the biennium. So that is something that we can advocate for, but I don't think that there's room to put an actual line item in for the OOST. But it's me, it's some finance positions, which also support the OOST in terms of contracting. And if we did need to administer grants, like those are like the behind the scenes things in terms of a DSL having additional capacity to support the OOST.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I appreciate that additional information, because I know we're here at the Gorge Commission, we're working to finalize our budget as well. So I pretty much knew the answer, that it was too late, but I just thought I'd raise the question.
It's never too late to start having conversations for the next biennium. Everything takes planning. Yeah, that's not to say that we couldn't start planning for that now if that's an option that hasn't been explored. And then also whatever other sidetrack you guys want to do in terms of putting forward your own bill to try to get additional funding. So we can try to come at it from a number of different angles.
Thank you, Andrea. And I would just say, in my opinion, not to minimize at all the importance of the coordinating role that DSL is playing for this organization. Since I've been in this short time as the director, I can honestly say none of this would happen without you and Lonnie and Caitlin helping guide us through. And I think it's important that we monetize that as well when we put together our marine reserves assessment. For example, we should probably have a conversation with perhaps Director Walker and you about how we can support DSL's POP for your continued work, and also what is that capacity that you can provide specifically to this assessment process, because there will be administrative work that needs to happen. And if we have to go out to contract for that, that's an additional cost. But if we can include that as matched in the grant, then that's very attractive for the funders. So we'll have that conversation coming forward here.
Definitely, I believe that Caitlin's position is also in that POP as well. So we, yes, we've had very limited resources that we've had to put a Band-Aid over for quite some time. So hopefully we can make sure that we have enough resources to be able to support all of the important work that you guys are doing.
All right, well, I'll show up to testify for that for sure.
Me too.
Okay, are there any other needs for the purposes of our meeting and our call here today before we adjourn this meeting?
Director Anderson, this is Steve again. Was You had also spoken when we talked about an early fall date about potential agenda items, and I don't know if that's something you wanted to talk about really quick, or if that is maybe something that we already know what we're going to be talking about next time.
Why don't we take this moment? If you have something to put on the table for that meeting, it would be great to know in advance. So.
Okay. Well, one thing I have been thinking about, and this maybe not for the next meeting, but perhaps the meeting after that, is looking at the nearshore research table that's posted on the OOST website, which is a spreadsheet of the ongoing monitoring and data collection activities that are occurring off the Oregon coast. And I know that a lot of these efforts, some are led by National Marine Fisheries Service, some by WDFW, various entities. And I know that a lot of those are going to be impacted by federal and state budgets, so on and so forth. But I'm wondering if it might be worthwhile at some point in the next year or so to go through that list of ongoing research activities to see how they could potentially supplement or inform or help out with what we are trying to do relative to the Marine Reserve Program assessment, because I know that a lot of that data that's being collected could help to inform that assessment. So maybe just thinking about what some of those ongoing activities are. We've got a good list of them, and how how those activities and information could help inform the assessment process.
Great. I haven't looked at that table. I presume that's something maybe that Andy Lanier has maintained in the past. It sounds like something that would be in his sandbox. I can have a conversation with him and Shelby subsequent to this meeting and see if we can queue something up at the appropriate time for that, Steve.
Okay, great. And thank you very much. And I'd also offer, whatever I can do to help out, look into some of these activities or work with DLCD or whoever, WDFW to get some information. I'd be willing to help out with that as well.
Great, thank you.
If I could offer perhaps another agenda item for the next meeting, it may be useful to hear from the Ocean Acidification Hypoxia Council. I believe at that point in time, we will have submitted the legislative report. And it would be good to understand for the purposes of this group, what initiatives are being planned, where the needs are, what the status is, just moving forward.
Great. And I'll follow up with you and probably Karen Braby and Jack Barth on that. Okay, other recommendations for future agenda items? All right, I think that's a sufficient pause. Very good. Well, if there's no further business, I am happy to adjourn this meeting. Wish you all a good weekend, and thank you for making this process flow very smoothly. And again, thanking the staff for preparing all of that very important background to help us through.
Thank you all.
Thank you,
Take
Senator
care.
Baldwin and Representative Gomberg, for your continued support.
Yeah.
Appreciate it very much. And we will see you in the fall, maybe sooner. Who knows? You never know when we're going to have a conference call, but at least in the fall.
Okay. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you,
very much.
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
All right.